As I felt that Sunday afternoon had nothing to do with the weather. It was the kind of October day that makes New England look like a postcard amber light cutting through the maple trees, the smell of wood smoke drifting from somewhere down the street. My daughter had organized a small gathering at my house to celebrate the closing of my company sale. 41 years I had run Caldwell Precision Manufacturing. 41 years of 5 a.m. mornings, of payroll decisions that kept me awake, of handshakes that built something real out of nothing. And 3 weeks ago I had signed the final papers. The buyers were a private equity group out of Chicago. The number was $28 million. I was 67 years old. I had more money than I would ever spend. And I was standing in my own living room watching my son-in-law move through the crowd of my friends and colleagues with the careful precision of a man performing a job. His name was Derek. He had married my daughter, Claire, 6 years ago. I had never trusted him, not because of anything dramatic, but because of the small things. The way he asked about my estate before he asked about my health. The way his eyes moved to my bookshelves and my walls when he first walked into my house, cataloging, appraising. The way he laughed just slightly too late at jokes, like he had to calculate first whether laughter was the correct response. Claire loved him. That was the beginning and end of my restraint for 6 years. My wife, Margaret, had passed 4 years earlier. Pancreatic cancer, 7 weeks from diagnosis to the end. She had met Derek twice before she died, and the only thing she ever said to me about him was quiet and precise, the way Margaret always was. "Watch that one, Walter." I had nodded and said nothing, and I had carried those 3 words with me every day since. The gathering was about 30 people, former employees, a few longtime clients, my attorney Gerald, my accountant Ray, Claire and Derek, and my grandson, Tyler, who was 9 years old and spent most of the afternoon chasing the neighbor's dog around the backyard. Watching Tyler was the best part of my day. I had made an announcement earlier in the afternoon briefly, without fanfare, the way I preferred things. A portion of the sale proceeds, $3 million, would be directed to the Margaret Caldwell Foundation, a scholarship fund for first-generation college students in our county. Margaret had been the first in her family to attend university. It had mattered to her more than almost anything. It mattered to me now. I watched Derek's expression when I said the number. It lasted less than a second, a tightening around the eyes, a stillness in the jaw before his face rearranged itself into something that looked like admiration. He started nodding slowly. He reached over and put his hand on Claire's back. I continued talking, but I had already filed what I saw. Gerald found me about an hour later, near the fireplace with a glass of bourbon. He was a compact, careful man in his early 70s. The kind of attorney who said very little but missed nothing. He had handled my legal affairs for 22 years. "Lovely event, Walter," he said. "Thank you for coming." He stood beside me for a moment, both of us looking out at the room. Then, quietly, "Claire's husband came to see me Thursday." I turned to look at him. Gerald was watching the room, not me. "He called the office Monday," Gerald continued. "Said he had some estate planning questions he wanted to discuss. Said he was asking on your behalf. Said you had authorized him to gather preliminary information about your current will structure." I kept my voice level. "I did not." "I know you didn't." Gerald took a small sip of his drink. "I told him I couldn't discuss client matters without direct authorization." He pushed a little. "Said you were getting older. That you had mentioned updating your documents. That he was just trying to help the family plan ahead." Gerald paused. He used the phrase, "the family," 4 times in 12 minutes. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to have you call me directly." He finally turned to look at me. "You didn't call." "Because I didn't know." Gerald nodded once. "I know that too. Which is why I'm telling you now." He turned back to the room. "You may want to think about what he's actually trying to find out, and why." He excused himself a few minutes later to say goodbye to another guest. I stood by the fireplace and finished my bourbon and watched Derek laugh at something one of my former plant managers was saying, his hand gesturing expansively, his posture relaxed and confident and completely at ease in my house. 41 years of reading people. I knew what I was looking at. I didn't say anything to Claire that evening. I kissed her goodbye at the door, hugged Tyler until he squirmed, and watched them drive away. Then I went to my study, sat down at my desk, and opened the bottom drawer where I kept a locked metal box. Inside the box was my current will, along with several other key documents. Everything appeared untouched. I photographed each page with my phone, noted the date and time, and locked it again. Then I called Gerald. "I need to update my estate documents," I said when he answered. "Can we meet Monday?" "I have 9 o'clock open," he said. He didn't ask why. Gerald never asked unnecessary questions. Over the following 2 weeks, I watched Derek with a patience that surprised even me. I had always been a deliberate man. Margaret used to say I could outweight a glacier, but this was different. This was personal in a way that manufacturing deadlines and contract negotiations had never been. This involved my daughter, my grandson, the thing I had spent my life building, and what would remain of it after I was gone. I accepted every invitation Derek and Claire extended. Sunday dinners, Tyler's soccer game on a Saturday morning, a birthday lunch for Claire at a restaurant downtown that Derek had chosen, and that was, I noticed, considerably more expensive than the places Claire usually preferred. I was quiet and warm, and I asked Derek questions about his work. He was in commercial real estate, and I listened carefully to the spaces between his answers. What I learned was this: 2 of his larger deals had fallen through in the past year. He had mentioned this once, briefly, then changed the subject with a speed that told me it was heavier than he let on. He had recently refinanced their home. Claire had told me this herself, casually, adding that it was to get a better rate, but the timing aligned with the deal losses in a way that I noted without commenting. He needed money. Not immediately, not desperately, but he needed it. And he had done the math, and the math had pointed him toward me. The Monday after the party, I had sat with Gerald for 2 hours. We restructured everything. The will was updated. A revocable trust was established with Gerald and my accountant Ray as co-trustees. The foundation's funding was protected in a separate, irrevocable structure that no family member could contest or access. What remained of the estate for Claire and Tyler was placed in a trust that distributed directly to Claire, and upon Tyler's adulthood, to Tyler with specific language that excluded any spouse from control or access to principal. Gerald had written that last clause without me asking. He simply looked up from his notepad at one point and said, "I'm adding a spendthrift provision," and I said, "Yes," and that was that. I did not tell Claire any of this. I wanted to protect her, and I also knew that if Derek sensed movement, he would accelerate whatever he was planning. I needed to understand the full shape of it first. The shape of it became clear on a Tuesday evening in November. Claire called me at 7:30, her voice tight. "Dad, I need to come over. Can I come now?" Alone. She was at my door 20 minutes later. Her eyes were red, but her jaw was set. She had always carried grief the way her mother did, refusing to let it collapse her. She sat at my kitchen table and wrapped both hands around the mug of tea I made her. "I found something," she said. She put her phone on the table and slid it toward me. On the screen was a photograph she had taken it herself, slightly blurred at the edges, of a document on Derek's desk. I picked up the phone and looked more carefully. It was a draft, handwritten on a yellow legal pad. At the top, in Derek's blocky print, Walter Caldwell Asset Transfer Structure. Below that, a rough diagram. My house, the investment accounts, the sale proceeds, lines drawn between boxes with notes beside them, joint ownership conversion, gift before death, power of attorney, medical trigger. That last phrase sat in my chest like a stone. Power of attorney, medical trigger. He was looking for a way to gain legal control over my affairs in the event of a health crisis. He was not planning to create that crisis. I did not believe that. I want to be precise, but he was planning to be positioned for it, to be the one holding the documents when the moment came, to have already, quietly, shifted enough of my assets into configurations that would benefit him, so that by the time anyone understood what had happened, it would simply look like estate planning. It was sophisticated, it was patient, and it had almost certainly been in motion since before he married my daughter. I looked up at Claire. She was watching me. "How long have you known something was wrong?" I asked. She closed her eyes for a moment. "A year, maybe? Little things. Questions he asked about your health. The way he talked about the company's sale before it happened, like it was already his problem to solve." She opened her eyes. I didn't want to see it. "I know. He called Gerald, didn't he?" "Yes." She exhaled slowly. "I found the notes 3 days ago. I haven't said anything to him. I didn't know what to do." She looked at me directly. "What do we do, Dad?" I reached across the table and covered her hands with mine. "I've already done most of it," I said. "Gerald and I restructured everything 2 weeks ago. He can't reach any of it, Claire. Not any of it." She stared at me. "You already knew?" "Gerald told me the night of the party." Something moved across her face, relief, and then something else. Something more complicated. "You didn't tell me. I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I involved you. I didn't want you to confront him and give him warning." I paused. "I'm sorry. I should have found a way to tell you sooner." She sat with that for a long moment. Then she nodded a single, slow nod, the same gesture her mother used to make when she had decided something. "What happens now?" she said. "Now," I said, "we call someone. Gerald had recommended an attorney who specialized in fraud and financial elder abuse. Her name was Patricia Howe, and she was 60 years old and had the focused, undramatic competence of someone who had seen every version of this story and was neither surprised nor sentimental about any of them. We met with her the following Claire and I brought the photographs of my original documents, Gerald's account of Derek's call, and Claire's photographs of the legal pad. Patricia looked at everything carefully. Then she looked at me. Did he ever obtain any document from you? Anything signed? No. Did he represent himself to anyone as having authority over your affairs, to a bank, a financial institution, anyone? I thought about this. He may have called my financial advisor's office. I'd need to check. Do that today, she said. She turned to Claire. I know this is difficult. What he did may rise to the level of criminal fraud attempting to obtain financial control through misrepresentation, but that determination depends on what we can establish about his specific representations. What we have now is strong civil ground. The question is what outcome you want. Claire was quiet for a moment. I want him out of my life, she said, and I want to make sure Tyler is protected. Patricia nodded. We can do both. What followed was 6 weeks of quiet, careful work. My financial advisor confirmed that a man identifying himself as Claire Caldwell's husband, calling on behalf of Walter Caldwell, had phoned twice, asking about the process for adding a co-signatory to my investment accounts. The advisor had taken notes both times, as was standard procedure, and had called me to confirm calls I had never received, because Derek had apparently provided a slightly altered callback number. That detail, small and specific, was the thread that unraveled the rest. Patricia worked with Gerald. Documents were verified, calls were logged, and the legal pad Claire had photographed was recovered. Claire removed it from the home herself on a day Derek was traveling and delivered it to Patricia's office. Derek was formally served on a Thursday afternoon in December. I was not there. I did not want to be. Claire told me about it later, sitting in my kitchen again, in the same chair, her hands around the same kind of mug. She was calmer now, worn but steady. He denied everything first, she said. Then, when Patricia's assistant showed him the call logs from the financial advisor, he went very quiet. She looked at her tea. He didn't even look at me. He retained his own attorney. The civil case settled 4 months later. Derek signed a comprehensive agreement. No claim, current or future, on any Caldwell asset or trust. No challenge to the will or foundation structure. Full acknowledgement, in writing, that he had misrepresented himself to both Gerald and the financial advisor. In exchange, Patricia agreed not to pursue criminal referral, a concession I made for Claire and Tyler's sake, not for his. He moved out in January. The divorce was final by spring. There is a particular kind of grief that has no clean name, the grief of watching your child lose something that should never have been taken from her. Claire mourned the marriage, even knowing what it was. She mourned it the way you mourn any long mistake, not because it was good, but because it was years, and years are irreplaceable. I let her mourn. I drove Tyler to soccer practice on Saturday mornings, and I helped Claire find a smaller house that felt like hers alone, and I said very little about Derek because there was nothing left to say about him that would help. What helped was time, and Tyler, and the quiet constancy of showing up. By the following October, a full year from that afternoon gathering, I was sitting on Claire's new back porch watching Tyler kick a soccer ball against the fence. The trees had turned again, the same amber and rust and gold. Claire brought out 2 mugs of coffee and sat in the chair beside me. The foundation received its first scholarship applications, she said. I know, Gerald forwarded them to me. Mom would have loved reading them. Yes, I said. She would have. We sat quietly for a while. Tyler scored an imaginary goal and threw both arms up and looked back at us, and we both applauded. He grinned and reset and kicked again. I keep thinking, Claire said after a moment, about how different it could have been. If you hadn't said something to Gerald, if Gerald hadn't told you at the party, if I hadn't looked at that legal pad. She wrapped both hands around her mug. So many places where it almost didn't happen. It happened, I said, because you were paying attention. I thought about Derek moving through my living room that October afternoon. The careful tour of a man who had already decided what he wanted and was simply working backward toward it. I thought about Margaret's 3 words. I thought about 41 years of watching people across negotiating tables and factory floors, learning the difference between someone who wanted to build something and someone who wanted to take something. I've been paying attention for a long time, I said. She leaned her head against my shoulder for a moment, a small gesture, the kind children carry into adulthood without noticing. Then she straightened and lifted her coffee. Tyler scored another imaginary goal. The maple tree at the back of the yard had gone the color of fire, and the afternoon light came through it the way it always did in October, the way it had every year of my life, steady and unhurried, like something that had no need to prove itself. Some things endure, that was all. Some things simply endure. If you've known someone who put themselves in harm's way, not out of malice, but out of need, and watched the difference between